I guess what important to me is God was interested in me. And that was the bottom line. His faithfulness, His Holy Spirit, the guiding and directing and teaching, just overwhelmed me, just unreal. And I got out of my bed and laid down and said, I surrender. We call it enlisting with Jesus. He now owns me. He's now my chief in charge of all my life.
Before we begin today's episode, we want to note that there is no official confirmation from the Marine Corps that Fred Saldana is the Marine in the iconic cover photo of Life magazine. And as Fred himself notes in this interview, in the fog of war, it's just impossible to know for certain. We leave it up to the listeners to make what they will of Fred's story and his conclusion that he is the Marine in this infamous photograph. We encourage listeners to compare Fred's Marine portrait with the Life magazine cover and just draw their own conclusions. Okay, now on to the episode. So in 1967, Life magazine published a photo on the cover of a Marine in Vietnam, along with an article about the horrors of the war. That photo has been republished in numerous places in books, articles, and so forth about the war. It's a picture of a young man named Fred. But the story doesn't end there. Fred ultimately survived the war, and this is that magazine. It's October 27, 1967. It's a very iconic photo from the Vietnam War. But yeah, ultimately, Fred survives the war, later comes to Christ, and ultimately believes in nonresistance and radical enemy love. And it's an honor to have Fred with us today on the Anabaptist Perspectives podcast. Thanks for joining us, Fred.
Thanks for inviting me.
So, let's start with your story. How did you end up as a Marine in Vietnam?
Well, it was 1967, and there was a lot of hectic stuff going on in my neighborhood as well as in the world about the war. They call it a war, but it was really a police action. It was really a war. It was never declared as a war. But at the time, I was kind of distracted with... my father paid for my college, with first semester, and I wasn't doing very well. With the distraction of wanting to make more money, I still was making money. Even when I was a kid, I was still making money. And alcoholism, I was working at a liquor store, and I would sometimes drink too much at the end of the night after paperwork. And I ended up in Gogies having breakfast. I was pretty wiped out by then. And I went to my first class, was accounting. I thought I was doing pretty good in accounting until my professor said, want to change classes? You're kind of distracting the class with your snoring. Tell you the truth, I didn't realize I was doing that. So distracting the class. So I did change class in the afternoon, but I still continued to work at the liquor store, making money, cruising down Hollywood and nightclubs. No, I wasn't paying much attention to my studies at all. My college deferment went down here real fast. And I said, I better do something here. And my dad was saying, what are you going to do? And I said, I guess I'll join the Marines before they draft me into the Army. My dad never liked the Vietnam War. He said that was not a war, and he was kind of annoyed. So when I joined the Marines, they gave me a week before I got in the bus in downtown Los Angeles and went to the Marine Depot in San Diego. But first thing I learned about being in San Diego was you got to get rid of all your stuff, and everything from guns to knives to drugs, anything else that doesn't belong. And after he said that, he said, you have 10 seconds to get off this bus and you're ready to use 6 of them. Guess what that door looked like?
Mm-hmm.
There was all kinds of guys trying to get through that bus door. And welcome to San Diego Depot.
Mm-hmm.
And ever since then, it was just hard work.
Mm-hmm.
And they made us do things I never thought of doing, like moving a pile of rocks from one side to the other. And then he said, I changed my mind, put it back where it was.
So this is essentially the Marine boot camp that you're going through at this point?
Yep.
Yeah.
Then when the drone instructor had a bad nightmare, he would take it out on us. He would say, because of you, I am here taking babysitting, you girls.
Mm.
They just call us girls. They just call us a lot of things, but that's the safest thing I think I could tell you. And so he threw us into the sand pit. And we did the backstroke. We went diving in the sand. We did every type of stroke you could think of. Then he threw us back into the barracks and said, okay, I feel happier now. But tomorrow I'm going to inspect this. There better not be one grain of sand in here. As he walked away, we looked at each other and closed the doors. We pretended we went into our beds, and he left. And suddenly all the blankets went, and he closed all the windows with blankets. Then I'm lifting something very important. Drill instructor said, I always have an honored platoon, and I will have an honored platoon again. He said, whoops. So that's how we went. We did extra everything. We put blankets, we swept that floor and swept it and inspected it and inspected it and swept it and swept all night. Oh. Then when he came in, our racks were made tight. You could throw a quarter on there, it would bounce. And we stood attention, or you came right in. And he inspected every inch of that place. Unbelievable. So he drilled us and put us through all kinds of stuff in there. Because I was short, I was called a house mouse. And all the short guys were meaner than the tall guys. I mean, they were rough. And one day I was in the drill instructor office, and we were, and the bottom line is, I'm going to take that smile off your face. Mm-hmm. You called me Smiley. I thought it was a big joke, you know. Mm-hmm. He came in, but when he came in, he surprised one of the guys. One of the guys were cleaning out an ashtray, and he was looking around. And he looked to see what the orders were. The drill instructor came in, surprised him. He dropped the glass ashtray on top of his smoky hat. Crushed it. I thought that was the funniest thing I ever did see. Whoops.
Oh, that did not end well.
Now, this guy's maybe, I say 7 feet, but he may be smaller than that. Compared to me. Yeah. Picked me up with one hand.
Oh.
Say, oh, you think that's funny, huh? He walked me over to a locker, opened the locker, threw me in, closed the door, and spread lighter fluid and lit it.
Whoa. Okay.
Now laugh, he says. I wasn't laughing. So the small guys were the toughest guys. Mm-hmm. The shorter you were, the tougher you became.
And so you probably would have learned fairly early on to do whatever you need to do to survive. Was it that type of environment?
Yes. Right? You survived. Mm-hmm. And you did everything. I mean, we did PT, we did the best we can, and we did more. Mm-hmm. We drilled, and we drilled even more. We were inspected, and we did more. Mm-hmm. At the end of the training, we were honored platoon. You'll see it in that book. It's honored platoon.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, we can bring this in. This is so the Marine Corps Recruit Depot. So this is 1967, San Diego, California. So this has been the book for what? Tell us about this. What is this?
This is a book about what a Marine goes through. And it has everything. It's not our pictures, but pictures of before.
Well, you're in here though.
Yeah, I mean,
I was going to say you're one of the. Does it have like a class photo or something in here? Oh, okay. I see what we're looking at.
They have the picture of the base,
Mm-hmm.
and they have the picture of what we went through. The commanding officer.
Wow.
See,
and you said you were the honor platoon, right?
Yeah,
so y'all would have been.
We were the best ones.
So you must have put in a
the
lot
best,
of
best
hard
one in
work.
the series. See, it has that.
Yeah.
This is the famous one in World War II.
Mm-hmm. Raising the flag at Iwo Jima.
Iwo Jima,
So
yeah.
there would have probably been, because this is close enough to World War II, there was probably still living in the shadow in some ways of what the Marines have done in the war.
These officers and some of the sergeants have been there for a while that have been through there. See this?
Wow.
You know what that is?
Was this chapel that y'all went to or church?
Yeah.
Or
we call it getting away from our drill instructor.
Okay,
now if you got religious.
Okay, so I'm very confused then. So like they made everybody go to church on a regular basis then, or what is this?
They didn't make you went.
Okay. To get away from
the drill instructor.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
So these are all the things you went through: jumping, running, hiking, climbing.
And how long is this process, this boot camp that you're going through?
Seems like forever.
I mean, I obviously have not been through this, but I'm getting the sense that this just feels like it would drag and drag and drag.
Yeah, this is a shooting range. Everybody went to the shooting range. And you can see the people marking down what shots you took. This is not quite hand-to-hand combat, but how to use a rifle in hand-to-hand combat.
Okay. Mm.
Give you a little glimpse of what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
My dad came to graduation, and this is you getting your clothes and medical. And here's the bunks and getting ready. These are the uniform you had to wear.
So you would have lived in this area for how long then? In
Pennsylvania?
No, sorry, no. With this whole process, how long were you here in San Diego?
In this, I was maybe a couple months.
Okay.
They put us through pretty quick.
Yeah.
Now, when I was there, we did. No, I don't know if they have it here. I probably do. They made a big rope web, like a chain, and everybody goes up one way, come down the other way. You don't know that till you're on boat. Then you climb off the boat with all your gear, and there's a boat floating, and there's a net coming down where you got to climb down. Our net never moved. This thing moved. I mean, you just went back and forth with the boat. And there you're trying to hold on to this net going down to the boat, and the boat changes, and each person, boat load takes off, another boat comes in, and a load of Marines, and they take off, another boat comes. We got there in the early morning where we saw the bullets flying green and red flying red, green, red, green, red, and flares in the air, and you said to yourself, this is for real now.
So this would have been after you'd shipped out of San Diego. You're shipped over on a ship, right? So a Navy vessel, and then this is your arrival.
Yeah.
How did that feel? Like, it must have been. Was it disorienting at that point, or did it feel like, well, we've kind of prepared for this, and this is what we're doing?
We went through training, but never prepared. It's like wondering what in the world I got myself into.
Yeah.
And later on, you say, I'd like to get out of this. And I told my wife, my most fears weren't dying, but coming back with a whole man. No arms missing, no legs missing. But I think most of all was having a right head, and I didn't have a right head at that point. I was just, like I told you earlier, I was just out to beat the system any way I can. So now
this is interesting to me. There's a lot of religious imagery,
the Jewish,
tied into
Catholic, Protestant.
But at the time, you're not Christian. You're not anything real. Are you religious at all at this point?
What's called Catholic.
Okay.
And I was religious because I need to be.
But it wasn't like, it wasn't.
I didn't pursue
Yeah.
Catholicism. I did it one time I was younger, but.
So kind of nominally maybe religious, sort of, but not. It's not like religion was a big part of your life.
Not
right?
even that.
No, not even that.
Not
Okay,
even that.
so you're in this book somewhere,
Yes.
right?
Yes, I am. There's the rifle range I said earlier.
Probably spent a lot of time there.
Yeah. Snapping tools, shooting.
Mm-hmm.
There's a target. You got the different scopes. I try not to be a sharpshooter, and I really clicked my rifle up a bit, so I would hit here.
So why did you not want?
I don't want to be a sniper.
Do you know why? Why?
Because I get to see someone.
Yeah.
And I get to know the person if I could recognize the person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My shooting coach says, "Wow, we could make you a good sniper." I said, "I didn't want to be a sniper." Mm-hmm. Well, you could stand up and hold a rifle and shoot 10 rounds and hit the target each time. They could say, "Whoa." Mm-hmm. So I didn't want. Well, it's the first thing didn't want to do is be a sniper. Mm-hmm. This is graduation, Visitors Day. You see all the people lined up straight. Mm-hmm. Sergeant with the color guard, the guy with our platoon flag.
Mm. I mean, this must have been. That's the thing with, military. It's trying to really form you into who they want you to be, right? So yeah. I'm sure you went through that process where you can almost feel yourself being formed into something else, right? Like right. Formed into your platoon and what you're supposed to be doing.
I was a civilian person. I became a military person. So we went through all that. Mm-hmm. And if you look closely, this is where you don't smile. Mm-hmm. He said,
so these are all the guys you would have been with?
All the guys I was with in our platoon. I don't know if any of those guys are alive anymore or not, but there they are.
So you go through this.
Yeah.
You're on a boat for a long time. Mm-hmm. You get to Vietnam, essentially. Yeah. Right. And that's when, again, that must be a kind of a shift, right? So it's okay, whoa, this isn't just boot camp. Like now there's real stakes of life and death involved.
Right.
You get there. And did that feel very disorienting? Or was it just like, you know what, we've prepared for this. This is just what we're doing.
It was normal. We fight to stay alive another day. And so we could fight again. Basically, what it was all about. Well, I got to tell you something, I guess. James Reed was my squad leader. He was sergeant. We call him Baby Sergeant because he looked so young. He looked younger than I did. And he made sure we had everything we needed. I was just his mule driver, and I was in charge of the ammunition. That's where I got hit the first time, was putting ammunition into the ammunition bunker. He came up to me. He said, "Hey, Fred, I need you to go down to the medical station and put bodies into bags so we can ship the bodies out when the next helicopter comes in." And I said, "I can't." He said, "How come?" I says, "I'm the only one here that has gun watch, and can't leave my gun watch. Not a good thing to do." He said, "Oh yeah, that's right. Well, I'm going to take care of your gun watch, and you go and put bags into we were piling them into trucks, just bags with bodies in it." So I went down, and about 10 minutes later, someone sent a messenger to where I was and said, "Fred, you need to go and identify James' body." 10 minutes. So you understand that he literally died for my position, my body. He was killed by a mortar. So when people say that Christ died for you, for me, I understood what that meant.
I don't even know what to say to something like that.
Yeah.
You know, like experiences like that are just so intense. You know, I mean that must linger with you.
I felt like writing his family. Then I said, why? What can I tell him that he took my watch, and the one who had been dead was me, but we was there, and he died.
So you were a transport essentially, but this must have been close to where things were happening if you got hit.
Oh, I got hit. I can't even count how many times.
Really?
Yeah.
How are you still here?
I don't know.
Wow.
I assume I was protected. I looked back in my past and I knew I was protected. But you know why? My private, we call him Private Band-Aid. I can't remember what his name is. I remember Private Band-Aid. And he was coming and says, "You're hit again?"
Oh no. So this was like a medical, one of the medical people?
Yeah, one of the medical people. "You're hit again."
Oh man. That's not good if the medical guy is saying you.
He even knows me by my name after a while. You know, just,
really?
Yeah, Fred, you hit again. What in the world?
Wow.
And so when I got hit with building the bunker, all I could remember was seeing a flash. And next thing you know, I was in the air flipping. And when I landed, I said, "Somebody answer that phone." It was ringing in my ears. Somebody answer that phone. I still have that now.
Wow.
Yeah, I have.
What was this? Some kind of a mortar
explosion?
Yeah.
It was a rocket.
How did you?
It landed in front of me. I never heard it.
How did? That's incredible. If it threw you, like you didn't lose your eyes.
Nothing.
Nothing.
I didn't have arms missing. Nothing. Wow. They used to say, one of the guys used to say, "Stay away from Freddy's bad luck. Everybody around him dies."
Oh my!
I said, "You don't have to say that." He said, "It's true." You know?
Wow.
It's true.
So literally, like you lost count of how many times you've been hit.
I turned one Purple Heart in, and my mother got so scared. And when I heard that, and frightened, and she would call me, go, "Stay alive, stay alive." So I stopped turning them in.
As in, so for those who don't know how the Purple Heart system works, you had to put in paperwork for that to get the Purple Heart?
Yeah, Carmen, I think, does that.
And you just basically said, I don't want those anymore.
I don't want those anymore.
But tell, what does it take to get a Purple Heart? Let's rewind. And what is that?
You get hit.
So if you get hit in
rifle,
combat,
bullet,
okay,
shrapnel was my thing. You know, yeah, just enjoy getting hit with shrapnel. It's just so much fun.
Shrapnel was your thing. Yeah, wow. Honestly, Fred, I don't think I've ever met someone who said that before.
It just happened all the time.
Wow. So I guess you were apparently in that zone of the war where things like mortars, rockets, things like that were a real threat. More so than maybe bullets, I guess. If you're getting hit with a lot of shrapnel, that's...
Ever hear the thing about being thankful for mud?
I haven't.
When you hit the mud and everything, and you look up and there's a mortar next to you, it didn't blow up.
Did that happen to you?
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
Rockets too.
Tell me about that.
First was, it was near the command post, and I heard it coming, and I dived into the mud. I hate diving in the mud, but it's better than getting wounded or killed. And there it was, right next to me.
Wow, how close did it land?
Too close.
Like
I could look up and it's there.
So basically, what you're saying is they launched a rocket towards your position. It landed so close that it was just right there, but it was a dud. It didn't blow up.
Didn't blow up.
If it would have blown up, you wouldn't be here right now, would you?
Right. And
did that happen more than once?
Oh yeah, mortars, more mortars than rockets.
Do you ever look back and just be amazed that you're here? Like, how did...
Always.
I can't imagine what that would even feel like to be so close to death so many times. And by sheer, I guess you could use words like luck, but obviously luck. God in his divine providence as well. But still, there's this sense that if that wouldn't have been a dud, you wouldn't be here. And it happened more than once, right? So that's, how do you... I can't even imagine really going through something like that, you know.
I thought about that later. I said, what is going on?
This whole time that you're there, I mean, it has to be extremely disorienting and confusing, right? Or did you not ever even have time to think about those things? It's just, I guess, survival.
You didn't think about anything. You just continued to work. We built our gun position stronger and better. We had a little hooch next to it. It was the gun position, ammo bunker, and our hooch. We could walk into our hooch. When we got finished with it, you crawl in. You didn't walk in, you crawled in. It was so fortified. It was not a good time. Definitely not a good time.
Yeah. How long were you there?
30 days. We used to say 30 days, hell on earth.
So would they rotate you
Yeah.
on for 30 and then you'd be off for a period? Or
no, we leave.
Okay.
Another ring battalion would come in.
Okay. And then how long in total were you in Vietnam before you go back to the States?
Too long. I was, because I came by boat, I got lost in the cracks. As a matter of fact, my top sergeant looked at me one day and said, "What in the world are you doing here?" I looked at him like weird, like, "What are you talking about? I've always been in a combat zone." He said, "You should have been out of here long ago." And it didn't take me long to get my stuff together and leave. But I was shocked. I said, And I had a short timer's calendar, but I got lost and I forgot about it. You forget about a lot of things.
Because again, it's like you're in this place of just surviving, right? I mean, and and there's just I can't imagine the chaos too. It feels like that would really, I'm trying to imagine how you would even make it through something like that.
Mentally, you don't make it through. Physically, you hope. And it's your heart. It's not. They train you for everything but the mind. Sap of war and seeing people getting killed almost yourself. We did a lot of spying while we were there. We went to villages, and the kids were usually your friends, and you talk to them. They speak pretty good English, and you try to find out information about what's going on in the area. We heard about Tet Offensive, but we didn't know when it's going to start. We knew right away after we couldn't come out of our camp. We were supposed to go on patrols. We couldn't get out of patrols.
The Tet Offensive, just for those that don't know, that would have been a major attack by the North Vietnamese, right? Was that in 1968, was it, or 67?
No, it was 67.
So it was while you were there.
Yeah, I was there.
And that, if I remember right, that was a big piece for the American people saying, wait a second, this war isn't going well, like we're not winning, and you probably would have got a sense of that too, right? The kind of the futility of just everything that
we were Marines.
Okay. So you didn't go there.
You didn't. They would surround us. It was like, I'm guessing 2,000 to 3,000 to 1. We were surrounded by the North Vietnamese army. They were determined to take the base. We were determined to not let them. And we usually listen to, I don't know if you ever heard of Hanoi Hannah.
No, I'm not familiar with it.
She was a radio personality from North Vietnam. We were amazed at how she know anything. How do we know we were 3-9 at Contien? Called names, anything like that, huh? 106s are going to get rid of you. We don't like you to be there. Or all night long. Marine, you die tonight. Marine, you die tonight.
Man, that must get to you, You
ignore it.
You ignore it, okay.
We tell them, we got you where we want you. You can shoot any position, we got you. We're surrounded. Yeah.
Oh man, wow! But obviously you survived it. Like
Yeah.
apparently that was not a successful attempt on the position you were in.
They didn't take Contian.
Man, so and that's the story that is here in Life magazine, right?
Right.
That particular When You're Surrounded,
Yeah.
and again, that's where this photo gets taken, and
I have no idea when he took it.
and somewhere in that, and that's the story that they're publishing.
Well, I looked at the original, and we're always diving into mud.
Wow.
If there's a hole there, we dive into that hole. And that was taken after I drove into a hole, because I sat there just contemplating on what in the world was going on. And David, he was always looking for a face.
So David is the photographer that took
Duncan,
this,
yeah.
right? David, which actually is the one who did this book.
Yeah, Douglas. David Douglas.
War with Heroes.
I have respect for that man. He died, a couple of years ago. He was 102, 103.
Oh, wow. So he was
in
the base
He died in French.
Okay, so he was in the base with you. And
he came with my company. I would think I was attached to them for a little while.
And so he was just a photographer there documenting the war, I guess, or what was his role?
He was there with my company. Where my company went, he went with them.
Wow.
He never thought of going to be in Conti. He's the only photographer that was there. He didn't get the government to fly him into helicopters like they did the other ones. They came in wanting a story, and David already had the story.
And that's how, again, ultimately, you're on the front cover of Life magazine about this story of what had happened to you all there. And
it wasn't very glorifying.
Yeah.
No, it was not one bit. And the worst part, I guess, is for me to be there. And you could put any other guys there in that front page. We all went through the same thing. We all got bombarded by machine gun fire, rifle fire, grenades. Well, not grenades, rockets. And one of the things I said to myself at the time is, I don't ever want to be in a hand-to-hand combat situation. I've been in hand-to-hand combat once, and it wasn't very funny. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't anything. You know what they did in boot camp was, after your, 100 hours of training in hand-to-hand combat, they put everybody, the whole unit, everybody into a thing, and you knew something was going on because there's those corpsmen over there and nurses over there and doctors and everything. Then a guy comes up and says, we will have a hand-to-hand situation for 4 seconds. That's usually how long hand-to-hand combat lasts. You're not allowed to kill anybody. So the bell rang, and next thing I know, everybody was throwing punches and kicks. And again, I was protected. When it was all over and there were about maybe 100 people standing up, I was one of them. There was a Mennonite there. This is my experience. Okay.
Wait, was this back in training or?
Yeah, in training.
Okay.
Interesting. Since I was the shortest guy there, they picked me up and told me to, this coward, make him fight. I said, what do you mean? He said, he doesn't want to fight, make him fight.
So was this...
Hit him with everything you have.
This was a Mennonite that was probably drafted?
I don't know, but they didn't say he was a Mennonite. They didn't tell me he was a Mennonite. He's just a coward. And I said, when did you want me to begin to attack him? He said, now. So I attacked him with everything I knew I could hit him with, a kick, groin, stomach, neck. He went down, and he got right back up. No sound. No phone hit me anymore. Nothing. He got back up for more. I said, hit him again. Beat him up. I beat him up again. He got back up. And this happened about 3 times already. He came back up, and he said, make that coward fight. And I looked at the sergeant and said, I'm sorry, but he's not a coward.
Hmm.
He didn't say anything. He didn't plead for have mercy. He didn't say, "Oh, don't hit me." No.
Hmm.
Got up quietly, got back up, ready for more.
Hmm. I can imagine that really stuck with you.
Sure did. Still does now.
Mm-hmm.
So
You don't know what happened to him.
No
after that.
idea.
Because so you have this experience, the hand-to-hand combat scenario where you see very vividly a totally different form of courage.
Yeah.
And then you spend this time in Vietnam, again, longer than you should have because of the paperwork, and you go through that experience, you come back, you're still definitely, from what you're saying, you weren't a Christian at the time, you weren't religious.
No.
You come back to America, you're still in the military. How do you encounter Jesus? Where does Christianity start coming into the picture for you? How did you break through all of these experiences that you've had? And was it people you met? Like, what's the story there where you can go through something this intense and come out the other side, if that makes sense?
Yeah. When I went back to California after getting out of the Marine Corps, Steve came urges to come back to Rhode Island. I don't know where they come from. I have no idea. I kept getting urges. And I told my dad about that, and he says, "That's crazy." I said, "Yeah, ain't that something?" And he says, "Why you want to leave? You're going to college. You got a good job. You got a good pad." And I told him, "Yeah, that's strange, huh?"
Mm-hmm.
I didn't tell him I was leaving because I know he would try to talk me out of it. So I left without telling him. I sold my Mustang to a friend of mine who needed a car, $400. What a deal he got.
Whoa.
I knew he needed a car real bad. So I sold him the car, got on the fastest airplane I could get, and I was done. I was gone. No more California. Done. So when I got into Rhode Island, I took a bus to London Green Airport, and I took a bus to Newport. And I looked up some old friends. That night, I slept in the car because I got no place else. A friend of mine had he had a garage, and he's the one that kept my Mustang running all the time. So he said he had a car there, and that nobody's in it. And I said, "What do you mean in it?" And said, "Why don't you just go lay down there and get some sleep?" So after I got in touch with Robert Hill, a friend of mine, and he lived between Fort Smith and Middletown. He was a trailer park there at the bottom of the hill. And we were with him for a little while. Then I got a hold of another friend. To make a big story long, I got as far as Newport as I can. Then I came back again. This time I went back into cooking. I was a pretty good cook. And I was cooking at a beach bar between Newport Beach and Middletown Beach called Omar's. And while I was there was a guy who didn't want to be at the boarding house he was at. He didn't tell me they were Christians. And I was at his grandfather's boarding house, so we switched, right? And that's when I found out that he had some rules there that was against my lifestyle. I said, okay, you didn't tell me. My so-called friend didn't tell me that. It was, so they loved me to death. I mean, they met all my needs and my questions, and I drove them crazy.
So you moved, so you basically, you're in this, it's like a boarding house, you said,
It's a boarding
house. So you're essentially living with a Christian family.
Christian family, yeah.
Was that a jolt?
It was a big joke.
Yeah.
It was a big, the guy didn't know anything about it. And he was retired Navy. That was a bigger joke, like I'm living with a Navy guy.
Wow, because you're a Marine with a Navy guy. So, wow. So I'm guessing that was a bit of a process, as you go through all of this, and like you said, a lot of questions and
a lot of rules.
a lot of rules.
Kind of rules, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, I could live with that, sort of. Not, I got to do all my activities outside the house. But I picked up my saxophone. I like playing blues, so I picked up I just woke up one night and wanted to play blues, so I started playing with my saxophone, like normal, almost, but in the wrong place, wrong time, wrong everything. And they kind of said, we don't mind your music, it's just at the strangest hours. Oops. So I don't know where that saxophone went to this day. It's somewhere, but I'm not. So I finally said yes to him going to church. We went to Middletown Baptist Church on the other side of Newport. And I went there maybe, I don't know, second time I went, third time, something like that. They spoke about the gospel of Jesus Christ and the kingdom of God and salvation by faith, not by works. I couldn't make myself good enough. Maybe God would decide to put me in his kingdom by faith. That didn't make any sense to me. So when they had an altar call, I went up, wanted to know so much about what was being spoken. And everybody congratulated me for being a Christian. I wasn't. So I was the only one in this all-year Bible school we call college. I registered there as an unbeliever. And when I went to go to school, I was a believer. That never happened to them before.
So at this point, so it sounds like God is really moving in you, but up to that point, you still hadn't made that final step, right? That final commitment. But somewhere in that process, that year at the Bible school, or the Bible college,
I wasn't there yet.
You weren't there yet.
No. I was wrestling with God and the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. I went from Matthew to Romans and gave up at Romans.
It's a complicated book.
Very complicated.
Yeah.
But the Holy Spirit is able to guide and direct and show. Yeah. I guess what important to me is God was interested in me. And that was the bottom line. His faithfulness, his Holy Spirit, the guiding and directing and teaching, just overwhelmed me, just unreal. And I got out of my bed and laid down and said, I surrender. We call it enlisting with Jesus. He now owns me. He's now my chief in charge of all my life. Mm-hmm. See, the Marine Corps just only had 4 years of your life and maybe 2 years in active duty, and that's it, 6 altogether.
And that's about what you did? Yeah. 6 years?
It was a lifetime of duty with Jesus. It still is.
It's quite the journey to go from a Marine in Vietnam, not religious at all.
No.
Then you go to Christian, you become a Christian, you're a believer in Jesus now. And then you go into the Anabaptist world now as well and come to a position on radical enemy love or non-resistance, whatever you would want to call that. That's quite the journey. And obviously these things don't happen overnight. I mean, this is years, of your life, right, as this story progresses. But can you walk me through that, like how you first encountered the Mennonites or the Anabaptists and ultimately joined that? Because that's what you would be today. How did that happen? I mean, you mentioned way back, the hand-to-hand combat with the person who wouldn't fight back. So I guess technically that would be your first interaction with first encounter, fight. Which you didn't know at the time probably, or didn't put that together. But then, you become a believer, go to this Bible college and so forth. So where does the Anabaptist part come into the story?
I learned very young young Christian, that God answers prayer. He does answer prayer. But your prayers shall be in line with His will. And I wanted to join. I've been to a lot of churches: Pentecostal, Presbyterian, Quaker. Oh, I've been to it all. And one of the things I really wanted to experience and to know is a group that obeyed Christ. I mean, really obeyed Christ. Now, for me, I read foot washing, but I never seen it. And Mennonites do foot washing. And if they could be that obedient, something that most Mennonites don't even think about as being important. Our church, I think, is important. That's how you show servanthood to each other. Jesus said, you may not understand it now, but you will understand it later. So and the people we met, well, they told us different things and taught us different things. And I'm like, wow, do people really live that way? And the first thing I thought of, those people live that way. And we were doing rod and staff for books, teaching kids.
Okay. So were you doing homeschooling then for your children as well? So you would have had a little bit of exposure then through that way, through the school curriculum.
I tell you about the monster that was in our home before homeschooling. We sent my daughter, we've always wanted to homeschool, to public school. And she came back a monster each time we sent her to school. I guess when we went around and around with the education system, and at one point, because we wanted to homeschool, they wanted to put us in jail. People were going to jail for homeschooling those years.
Because this would have been before some of the legislation, I guess, right? That lets people homeschool now. See, and that's easy for someone my age to just kind of take for granted. Like, oh yeah, you can choose. You can go to church school or homeschool, whatever. But that wasn't an option, right? Back then. Right. So this is some of the encounter you're having then with the Mennonites to begin with then through the homeschool curriculum. And yeah. What year would have this been when you would have first went to a Mennonite church? I'm really curious where that comes into this story.
It was 96, 91. Okay, I thought ahead of time.
So you had been a Christian for a little while then before you would have went to a Mennonite church.
73.
Okay, so so that's probably, you had mentioned earlier how you had been to a lot of different churches, kind of searching around for different options, right? So that would have happened in that period of time of coming to Jesus in the 70s to your first encounter with the Mennonites, and then from there.
What I guess was interesting for us was the effort we put forth. It's like 6 to 8 hours to Newport and another 10, 12 maybe to Shippensburg. Now, how we got introduced to Shippensburg was a friend of ours wanted us to go to this church. It's called Charity. You heard about charity churches, right? Okay, it was Charity, the real original Charity. Because our friend went to a conference and they stopped there to check it out. They said, you should check this place out, this church. I said, why? Because they look like you, they dress like you, they talk like you. I said, what? And we're going to help you. They had a van, so they filled up the van with gasoline and made sure I had everything ready to go. And go. So we went. But we had friends with Faith Mennonite, where Isaac was. So we went there first. Then we went to Charity. Charity was all right. The fellowship was great. The sermons were fabulous. But my intake and my wife's intake was all subjects. There's not one book study in the whole place. And in fact, we felt that was kind of imbalance. And in came somebody that you were well known, John Diller Martin.
Okay. Oh, fascinating. So we've interviewed him on this podcast a number of times. Good guy. Yeah. Okay.
So he did a whole, we got his cassette tapes, and then we found out what his birthday was, and my wife's birthday and his birthday was almost close together. So we sent him some letters. We found out where he lived at, and we sent him letters.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we kept corresponding. And that's why we kept going down there.
So this would have been Shippensburg,
Yeah,
Pennsylvania. And you're still, you were living in Rhode Island at the time, though, right? Or
Vermont.
Okay, Vermont. Yeah. So it's a bit of a drive.
Well,
I mean, there's
I moved from California to Rhode Island to West Virginia, from West Virginia back to Rhode Island to Massachusetts, and from Massachusetts to Vermont, and Vermont, Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
We were moving.
So there's a lot where you're trying things, you're in different places. The connection point with John D. Martin is quite interesting, though. So you send him a letter or some letters.
Yeah.
Does he get in touch with you, and that's how you found out about the church there, or how did that?
When we wrote him, he wrote us back.
Okay.
Yeah. And we got the funniest picture of the family. It looked like somebody from the 50s, the big glasses the girls were wearing, and John was white hair. I couldn't believe he still had white hair.
Yeah.
And so and at that time he had 2 trailers put together with enclosed balcony, and it was fabulous. I really liked that. His house is nice now, but I really missed the trailers.
Well, so you got in touch with him and then went to visit, I guess, to meet him, see the church. Yeah. But ultimately, you ended up moving to Shippensburg then.
That's another story.
Okay.
Okay, I tried to. We tried to move. We wanted to move to a different church, so we tried to move to Philadelphia, New York. There was a church there we know, the Martins and others. That didn't go. Somewhere in there, our retailer took off with all everybody's money but ours. We didn't give him any money yet. So, another time we tried to move to Bainbridge, New York. That didn't go either. There's something always happens that we couldn't do anything. Then we said, well, Shippensburg down the road. 8-9 hours, and we said maybe we'll try Shippensburg. We took out the for sale sign again, and next day was sold. The guy came in. He wanted to have an inspector come in. He offered us, I don't know, 20-30% less than we were offering. Always asking for. And so that was it. And we spent the rest of the time after that getting ready to pack. And meanwhile, we went back to Shippensburg and bought a house there. So now we have a house, and we knew where the bedrooms were and the room, and it was the fastest unloading in Shippensburg history. I mean, we unload our truck so fast they couldn't believe it. So, because we knew where things were going. We had boxes labeled, and this goes living room, this goes in the girls' room, this goes in our room, this goes, basement,
But it sounds so. Wow, this is such a story of, attempting different things, and God slowly leading you. These things don't happen fast, but ultimately that's where you end up. You're part of the church there. And in some ways it feels a bit circuitous, right? There's a process involved, but this story is just really something for me. I'm still trying to get my head around how we can go from, you being the face of the Vietnam War in some ways to becoming a Christian, following Jesus and trying to, being in a lot of different church environments, and then ultimately joining the Anabaptist. That's a really phenomenal story, and Uh,
I didn't think so
Yeah.
at the time.
yeah, and that's
I wasn't even
Mhm.
considering what I found the story.
But at the time, you're probably just doing, okay, what's the next step? What is God telling us to do? Where should we go next? Did it feel kind of like that, or did it feel like, oh, there's so many unknowns? I mean,
It was strange. One time we came down to Shippensburg, and I was somewhat tired. I was driving, and my friend at the time he was a bishop there in Shippensburg, and Lynn Martin said, "Hey Fred, we're having a work thing at one of the teachers' houses, and was wondering if you want to go." I said, "If you put a hammer in my hand, I'll go." So we went. I did construction in California, so we went and I helped put the eaves on the roof, and nail it all in, put together and all. Never realizing I was going to own that house. So everybody told me, "Hey, how do you put the apartment in the back?" Oh, I did a lot of it, but I had help.
Man. So I want to back up a little here and just say, okay, so you've had a lot of life experience. You've been through a lot of different things. As we think about all this, you were packaging up your story and what you've been through. What would you say to the next generation? As the next generation, wrestling with the challenges of following Jesus and getting distracted sometimes by the world's system and the world's influence and kingdoms of this world. From your own experience and what you've been through, what would you like to tell the next generation?
The distractions of this world and the lures and the lusts and competing for your mind, your heart, your body. It took away my deferment in college because of my partying, my cruising around Hollywood, bars, clubs. I was everywhere, and the money you're going to waste doing that. You remember, guys, it's God's money, God's property, and it gave me a ticket to Vietnam, Marine Corp. I'm thankful it was a return ticket. I went there and I came back, and there's nothing there. There's emptiness. Might look good for a little while, but in the long run, not worth it. It's worth serving Jesus. Jesus said, "Who will go on to be great in the kingdom, let him be the servant." And that's very true. Even today, it's very true. If you want to succeed in this world, be a servant of Jesus. Jesus, your King, your Savior, your everything. That's all that matters. Nothing else matters. You have a good church that's preaching the Word of God, and you got people who want to follow it and continue in it. That's the best place to be. I'm glad I'm at Shippensburg.
Fred, I just want to thank you for the time and your willingness to share this story. I think this is important for us to hear stories like this, what you've learned and been through. These are, I can't imagine the things you went through, and I feel honored that you were willing to come here and tell this story to me and to those that will listen to this. Thank you for coming out today.
I'm glad you asked me to come.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Amen.
Thanks for listening to this episode with Fred. If you found this interesting, you may want to check out the episode we did with Zach Johnson about how he ultimately left the Air Force after coming to a position of radical enemy love. You can find that linked in the description below. If you appreciate what we're doing here at Anabaptist Perspectives, leave a like and a comment, as that helps more people find this podcast. You can find all our content on our website at anabaptistperspectives.org. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next episode.